Hello, everyone. How are you doing? And welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, where we have the discussions on social innovation and becoming the CEO of you. Each week, I zoom in a thought leader, practitioner, or content creator, and we just chat it up. We talk about ideas and strategies on how you can live your best life. I am your host, Dr. Will, and today I am here with Lyn Hilt. How are you doing, Lyn?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you for being a guest on the show, and the honor is mine. Now, people, this is season 4, and season 4 is the season of the edupreneur. Lyn and I were sort of chatting before the interview, and you know that I'm really focusing on educators monetizing their talents. And today is very interesting because Lyn used to be a full-time educator, and she left her gig to become a full-time edupreneur, which is why I wanted to have her on the show to help you with creating a roadmap for yourself. So Lyn, for those who will be watching or listening on SoundCloud or iTunes, will you please introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Lyn Hilt, and I am currently what I describe as a freelance educational artist. So I have my hands in a couple of different things, my hands in my brain, and it's a really cool time. It's a great time to be in this position because of the types of opportunities that are out there, both face-to-face in terms of working with teams of administrators and teachers, and also in the digital realm. And so I play a number of roles in that space, and I wear a number of hats. Prior to this kind of gig the circuit that I'm on, I was an elementary school principal and also an instructional technology coach. And prior to that, I was a classroom teacher for a number of years. So I try to build on all of those experiences in crafting the work that I do now in a consultant's role. And it's been a great ride. I've really enjoyed this past. It's been about a year and a half, almost 2 years since I've really focused on this. And one of the questions you might ask me if you want me to roll into the why, kind of the why behind it. And I know the why is different for everybody, but for me, it just happened to be a matter of timing with my family and what we needed at the time. And my son was born 5 years ago. And after that, that's when I left the principalship. And for our family, and every family is different, but we made it a priority that I would stay home kind of with him for as long as I could. And I wasn't interested in staying in administration at that time while he was so young. And so after I went back to the district, I went in as a coach, which allowed me a lot more flexibility with our home schedule. But it was also nice because I got to be back in classrooms again on a more regular basis, which is one of the things we hear about administrators kind of getting out of touch with what goes on in the classroom. So I got to have some of that practical experience back, and I got to kind of work on the technology integration piece as well, which I've always been passionate about. And then my daughter was born a couple of years later. And so after she was born, it became, a question of, do I want to go back into a school, or do we want to build up this idea and this company and the consulting work that we had going on? So that's what we decided to do. I resigned officially last year, and she just turned 2. So that's kind of what I've been doing for the past couple of years.
And it's interesting for you to give me that background, because there are people that you and I both know from Twitter and have met in person at conferences that had the positions that you have had and that I have. And you would see them, they're speaking here, they're writing here, they're speaking here, they're speaking here, they're speaking here. And in my mind, I'm going, you missing a lot of days from work. And in my mind, I'm thinking your reputation is getting to that point to where I know you'll be leaving soon.
Right.
And lo and behold, they walk away.
Sure.
And join other organizations or become full-time speaker consultants. So what does Hilt Consultants LLC do? How did you discover your target audience? Because that's key right there. And which products or services do you offer?
Yes. So my husband, his name is Jason, and he is also an educator. He's an educational leader. He's currently in a director of technology position for a school district. And prior to that, he worked in central office as a curriculum leader, as a technology leader. He also was a classroom teacher. So, and he has his doctorate in educational leadership. So between the two of us, we have quite a range of experiences and things that we can offer people in terms of what we do. One of the nice things about our company is that we partner with some really amazing people. And I think a lot of that stems back to the connections that, and we'll talk about social in a little bit, but the people that you get to know in this space and the networks that they have and the ways that you can support them and they can support you. For example, Rich Kiker of Kiker Learning is a Google Partner for Education, and he is someone that we work with all of the time. So Rich is one of those people you described earlier who worked in a school system and for a long time would be spending his off days building up his Google for Education work. And at some point it just became, he had to decide, do I want to stay in the system or do I want to pursue this on my own? And he decided, you know what, I'm going to pursue this thing. And he's done a great job with that. So he is someone who will reach out to us and say, do you have these days available to do Google for Education work? Sometimes it's very technical types of trainings where we're working with teams and introducing them to the G Suite basics. Sometimes it's more philosophical where you're working with administrative teams talking about rollouts and planning. And sometimes it's things like a keynote address, which I have in a couple of weeks. So a lot of our work comes, from that venue. But I've also, through, my relationships with people on Twitter, I've established connections who will bring me in to talk about just, not really the technical pieces, but more of the leadership angle. So teams of administrators looking to say, look, we know that changes are needed, but we're not exactly sure what steps to take in this innovation realm. So how can we start doing that? Where should we focus? And so I've worked with a couple of districts on that in that regard as well. And then most recently, my role in the digital learning space has been with the Modern Learners team. If you're familiar with the work of Will Richardson and Bruce Dixon, and Missy Emler has formed this amazing team called Modern Learners, and they offer a group for leadership called Change School. And in the past couple of months, we've built out a new digital online community called Change Leaders Community. And we're really looking to grab those educational leaders or aspiring leaders who know that change is needed in their schools, but maybe they're not sure of the first steps, or they have a lot of questions around it, and maybe they are connected, like they go to the Twitter and they read all of the noise coming in, but they just want to find a signal in that noise. And that's what we've been working on building up, and it's been just a great experience so far. So for us as a group, as a company, we partner with people who are doing good work and who put learning at a focus, and who understand that, it's more than just about like a book sale or, a Twitter chat every week or something like that. We're trying to find people who are doing really hard, difficult thinking with groups of people. So, I know your question is really important about target audience, and that's something I'm working through on a couple of my ventures. And I don't know, have you read StoryBrand by Donald Miller? I want to say that that's the right name, because that's building a story brand, clarify your message so customers will listen. That's what I'm going through right now. And it takes you through those questions like, who is your audience? What value can you bring to them? What can they get from you that they can't from other venues and things like that? But it's a really important question, and something that everybody who wants to get in this arena needs to really consider. So for us, since we're dabbling in a little bit of everything, I guess it really depends on who we're working with and what their purpose is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because even for myself, when I sit down and think about, okay, what do I bring to the table best? What will set me aside? What do I know so well
Mhm.
right? I know it like I can close my eyes and I can just do it.
Yes.
Because, and I've told this, you know, when those of us in this sphere, you know, you go to these conferences or whatever, and you see Eric speak, you see Tom speak, you see other people speak and do their thing. You have to be very careful as to not get caught up in what they do,
Mm-hmm.
and try to compare yourself to who they are and try to become them.
Right.
Like you got to do what you do best. You know, maybe take some nuggets and go, oh, I like how they explain this, but
Mm-hmm.
your style has to be your style. You know, I saw Tom speak last year, right about this time. And I'm in the room, I'm looking around the room as he is speaking. People are just crying. There are just women everywhere like this. I'm like, damn, that'll never be me.
But so what Tom gets, like, he understands that power of story, right? Like he'll reach your heart, and there are a lot of speakers on that circuit who do that, and they know that's an essential element. Like, if you're going to listen to me beyond these points that I'm making about teaching and innovation, I'm going to need to get you somehow emotionally, because this might be the one and only time I get to work with you, which is another part of the difficulty of being a consultant, is that if you're only there for one day or maybe a kickoff day and then one or two follow-ups, you don't get to build relationships with the people that you're working with for the most part. And we know what's grounded in good learning is that a relationship among, the people who are learning together. And that for me is the hardest part about consulting, especially Google Days, is that I'm going in cold to a group of people that don't know me. And so you have to make that emotional connection with people somehow. And a lot of times for me, it comes by just explaining where I'm coming from. Like, I spent this time in the classroom, and I always show a picture of my kids. These are my kids. And this is why this is important to me, because they're going to school soon, and I need schools to be different for them, quite frankly. And so getting to know the people that you're serving is really, really important. And I think somebody like Tom, for sure, understands that he has to give a little bit of himself if he's going to get the trust of people that are out there too. So
yeah, I just use humor.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that's sort of my go-to. Like, I don't write jokes, but I just try to just keep it light with it, because I'm not that type of storyteller where I'm going to be grandiose and have people just falling out, testifying like, yes. So and Eric is real intense too. So I just try to take nuggets, sort of like, okay, their message is solid. Like, they never deviate from the message. So make sure that my message is solid and don't deviate.
Right.
Don't walk on a tangent. Don't confuse people. But it's really
devil's advocate for a second too. When we, the modern learners, Bruce and Will constantly push us beyond the comfort of where we want to go. And so Bruce wrote a post on our Shifting Conversations blog it was like a month or so ago, and it was called "What We Need Are Cold Shower Keynotes." So he is saying, look, there are people out there who will make you cry and who will make you laugh. But when you leave there, what are you doing differently than when you got there? So there are a lot of feel-good messages out there, or that emotional piece is there. But next step is, maybe we just need to be quite frank and say the things we're doing in schools aren't working for the kids that we have now, and we need to do something differently. And let's get down to it and do the hard work. So I always say, to people who are interested in speaking, like, definitely connect with your audience, give them that laugh, give them those tears if you must, but give them hard work to do, or else what's it for? Like, why are we bringing somebody in? Do you know what I mean?
And I hear you, but here's the thing about it, and about that keynote, and the keynote in general, what I've noticed with my own work, there are some teachers that those words, they're going to walk away from you and they're going to go out and innovate. They're going to go out and put the hard work. They're going to go out and become reflective practitioners. And then there are some, they don't want to be bothered anyway.
Right.
They want the overhead projector. They teach with pencil and paper. I just had a teacher in my room the other day, and I was talking to her, and I was giving her Chromebooks that were brand new Chromebooks that were swapped out for damaged ones. And I just said casually, well, how was Schoology going for you? And she said, well, I only use it for bell ringers. I said, interesting. And then she went into how technology is tough and it takes work. And I'm like, I would assume pencil and paper takes work too.
Right.
But as I'm trying to explain to her is, because I don't try to go into some of the overarching themes that I know that we should be talking about, but simply said was the computer, when it comes to delivering straight content and assessment, no human being can beat a computer. That's just fact.
For just pushing out stuff.
Yes. So if you just want to say, these are dates, these are facts, just straight content that they need to know, and assessment, no teacher can beat the computer. Now, what the teacher can do is provide context for that content. That teacher can create dialogue. That teacher can create discussion. They can do projects. They can facilitate sort of that larger understanding of what does that mean for you today. The computer cannot do that.
Right.
And so I went to talk to her. It's like the computer frees you. This technology frees you to do the real work. Right. But if you are so wrapped up in this is teaching and this other stuff is hard work, as though this isn't hard, then I don't know what to say to you to get to the next level.
Yeah, I think the emphasis, right, it still is on teaching and instruction, and it's not on actual learning. That all of our professional development is on instruction, on teaching. Our evaluations of teachers are on instruction of teaching, and we've gotten away, well, we've never been to a place where we're saying, teachers, you're the learner, and what are you learning? And how is that impacting what your students are learning? How do you see your students as learners? How are we assessing that? What does that look like versus what instructional strategies are you using? How is your teaching changing? It's a whole culture thing. And we're very much, most of our systems are teaching cultures, and they're not learning cultures across the board, especially through administration as well. And that's a problem. And we're not going to be at, like, what you're asking her to think about is how she can better facilitate learning as the adult in the room. But all she's hearing is the taxing time it's going to add to her instructional duties or her teaching tasks that she has to do. And that's a mindset, that's a whole awareness thing. That's we're starting to try to get people to think about.
and I try to focus on that part more so than anything else. So even when I talk about blended learning, it's in the focus of how can we create these groups in order for you to create learning experiences with students in this type of manner, to free you to be able to do what I would assume you really want to do.
Yeah, it's really hard to do that, especially with technical consulting, like in a Google workshop. The last thing sometimes they want to hear me do is start talking about teaching culture versus learning culture. They want to know, like, well, what do I do? What do they do with Google Docs? Like, what do I do? How do I organize Google Drive? And in some instances, we just need to ground them in proficiency with some of the tools. And then once they're comfortable, we can start saying, hey, now let's get away from instruction. Let's think about learning and what can kids create with this, and why would they create with this, and how could they make their thinking visible, and why would that be important to you as someone who's guiding them through that. So it is really hard in the ed tech space to focus on that because of the how we're trying to emphasize the tool use and how it can be useful instructionally. So
I hear you, but I will tell you this: That is the easy part, because of what you just spoke about, they want to learn. Because when a school district called me in to do the Google training, look, I'm there for 8 hours. So it was so easy for me to say, this is how Google Doc works. Email each other. And they're in there typing, and they go, ooh,
yeah, it's very exciting.
Collaboration. That was just really easy for me to just go in and get out and get my money.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, let's be real. Because a lot of trainers do the same thing. When a district pays for PD for a tool they bought, the person comes in, click here, click that, click this, maybe answer a couple of questions, and then, hey, they're packing up their cart and rolling out themselves. So it's easy to do it. It's easy living if you can get it.
And because there's so many of those types of people out there, you really want to distinguish yourself in terms of having a principal who sat in, or teachers say, wow, that person who came in to teach us Google taught us so much more than that, because, she opened up these possibilities and showed us examples of this and really made us think about this. And if you can get that word churning about you, in your geographic region, you're going to get phone calls from neighboring districts, and, those networks are going to start to get built based on the good responses that you had. Which is one way, we talked about in some of the questions, advice for people trying to get started. It really is about kind of word of mouth, connections, networks. It's a lot about who you know, which is unfair to somebody who doesn't know a whole lot of people. But as you start to build it up, don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and say, hey, do you have any connections in this area? Do you recommend that I contact principals? Do you, what advice do you have for me as I start to get on that? Google does a good job, and probably Schoology does too, of publishing lists of people who are qualified trainers for their products. So that's one way where you can find, our name is, we're listed in a directory that's separated out by geographic region of people who can provide services for your district. So that makes it easy, kind of easy advertising for us. But otherwise, don't be afraid to reach out and say, hey, I offer this. Who can you get me in touch with to do that?
So let's get into pricing, because this is something that I'm still struggling with as we move our company from a traditional consulting company to a more digital one, offering the bulk of our services via the internet. How should an entrepreneur go about pricing their products or services?
Yeah, that's always a hard question, because nobody ever wants to talk about what they're charging, right? But it is really important. If this is going to be your livelihood, or at least supplement your livelihood, then you have to ask for what you're worth, and you have to believe that you're worth every penny.
Yes.
And like you have often said, don't give away your stuff for free, because that, and not only you have said this, but someone who is an amazing journalist, someone like Audrey Waters, if you follow her work, she, will say all the time, don't write for free. When you write for free, it diminishes the value of someone who writes for a paycheck to live, to pay the rent or whatever. I need to get paid to write. And it's true. And certainly I write for free on my own blog. That's my personal reflection space. But if a publication were to approach me and say, hey, did you write about this, or would you be interested in write about that? I would expect something from that. So in terms of pricing, for sure, know what you're worth and ask for what you believe you're worth, and maybe do a little digging. There's a Google Trainer group, a closed group, where people will very frankly say, what are you guys charging for a day of this or a half day of this? And then depending on the geographic area, that's the other thing, we'll respond and say what's typical. So know your region, know what schools are paying out. You don't want to go in and ask for something that's 3 times what a school in that area would typically pay for. Know where their funding's coming from, if it's from like a general budget, or if they have a grant that's paying for the professional development, because that happens a lot. And when sometimes with grant funding, their hands are tied. They're up to a certain amount and that's it. Whereas other times they'll negotiate with you. And so you can say, you know, I'm putting this price out here. This is what I believe this day would be worth, but I'm willing to, you know, negotiate. I want to meet the needs of the district. I do that a lot as well. And so you have to think too, like in my instance, when I'm partnering with Rich Kiker, he does a lot of that for us since he's the point person. So he kind of works out the deals based on what his reputation is and how he's been dealing with districts in the past. And then that kind of trickles down to us. So know your value, ask straight up for what you want. Put it, if you're comfortable with negotiating, tell them that. Just say, this is what I've traditionally charged in the past, and this is what I'd be, you know, comfortable with. And I've known people too that if a district has really lowballed them, they'd say, I'm sorry, I'm not able to do that for that time. There are so many expenses involved with consulting, as we were chatting about earlier, with travel. If you're asking me to fly across the country to do a Google training, you're going to need to pay me more than if I am just, you know, driving an hour down the road to do it. And that, don't be afraid to ask for that type of thing as well. Like, make sure the whole picture is in mind. And this kind of leads into the LLC question, because if you are incorporating yourself, you have to be cognizant of the tax structure, where you might get a paycheck that looks really great, but subtracting out the taxes that you'll need to pay on that paycheck, the fact that since I'm not currently in Pennsylvania's teaching system, I'm not contributing to retirement at the moment. So we need to factor in those types of savings that we need to put away. There are a lot of things that fall into that price. So let's just say for yourself, you're going to ask $2,000 for a day-long training. Well, that sounds like a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it's not $2,000 that you are actually taking home. So all those types of things you want to think about and talk about with the people that you're in your company, or if you know your I'm thinking of the word for the person who does your taxes.
Your accountant.
Yeah, your accountant, if you have a CEO, which is, you know, my husband's gig. So for us, we went to an LLC just because it was the two of us and we share personal assets, and the benefits of an LLC are that your personal assets are kind of separated out from your company's assets, and you're not liable personally if something would happen in terms of that. We also carry business insurance, which I would recommend people do as well. It was very inexpensive to add on to our home insurance, car insurance, and that just covers you in the event something weird would happen, like you drop your projector on somebody's foot, or, you know, I mean, just, you probably will never need it, but just that peace of mind to have it to cover yourself. And in Pennsylvania, the LLC process was very, very easy and very inexpensive. And I think a lot of people try to decide, do I want to do an LLC or do I want to incorporate? I honestly don't have, you know, advice in terms of one or the other. We looked at the LLC, and that's what worked for us. So, yeah.
And I, you know, I'm a huge advocate for folks getting paid now. I have tweeted out and live by this. I do not have availability dates. I have availability rates, because your free is your personal blog.
Right.
Right. My free is this podcast. Now, if I have relationships with someone, you know, like a Schoology, because I'm be honest with you, I've been blessed to be where I am now, partly because of that relationship. Because someone from Tech Edge magazine was doing a piece on Schoology, and they reached out to Schoology, and Schoology said, for this piece, you need to talk to Dr. Will. That magazine interview, the layout was beautiful. That took me to a next level, because now all of a sudden, I wasn't just Twitter known. I was known on another level.
Right.
And I've done webinars for them as well. So they've pushed some of my own podcasts on their blog. So with that relationship, I have done stuff for them for free, because we just road dogs. I consider them cool like that. But I am a contributor as well to their blog, in which I get a check for it. Now, I'll also tell people out here, educators, I know for a fact, look, Ed Surge and some of these people, they're sexy, right? Sexy companies. It's sexy to be listed by them. Flattering. I'm not going to lie, but I'm going to tell you this. When Ed Surge or other people reach out to you, if you write a couple of articles for them for free just to get your foot in the door, I understand. Look, you got to walk before you run. But after that, you better tell Ed Surge you need an invoice because you cannot sit up there and you look down. I've written 10 articles for Ed Surge and you just get a badge.
Right.
Because Ed Surge, they get paid.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? You're producing content for them. It's kind of like ISTE, where I knew this cat, he went to ISTE. They never told him that his session was a paid session.
Oh, okay.
He get there and find out it's a paid session, but he didn't get a check.
Right. He probably had to pay to go too.
Had to pay to go.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you look at some of the practices of these conferences and organizations, you have to know your worth. And I say add tax, shipping, and handling and get paid. And don't be afraid as an educator to say, you know, damn it, my time, my intellectual capital, my effort is worth me getting paid.
Agree. Yeah, I agree too. There are things that you can do to get your foot in the door, which is great. But if you're really looking to build a brand for yourself, you have to be able to demonstrate your value and stand by it and say that I am worth this. Now, if there's a project that you will do free of charge because you are truly passionate about it, then do it. You know, I think about that book that was just written by all of the, you know, kind of Twitter names like Tom and Joe Mazza, and they wrote that book and the proceeds are going elsewhere to support other people. Absolutely. That's the type of thing you do for no payment, you know, because that's a learning experience and that benefits other people. But if you, and you know, and or if you're in a situation where you are living comfortably with your teacher or administrator salary and you just want to contribute for the sake of contributing and you're not really looking to roll it into anything else, then awesome. You know, I think every situation is different, but there are a lot of people who do need to support themselves additionally. And, you know, like for us, like because I chose to stay home, and that was just a situation that we decided was best, and it's different for everybody. But then all of a sudden we're a one income family, and that comes with a lot of sacrifices. And so I need to contribute, and this is how I'm doing it. So just taking a look at what you need from it is really important, and then where you want to go with it, I think, too. Sure.
I mean, we're two incomes, but I still want my check.
Right.
Because and here the key for me, a light went off because I went to a conference and I saw speakers they brought in that I knew were getting paid. And I'm sitting in the sessions and I'm going, this person is not a unicorn.
Right.
They are not. I'm not saying they weren't good, but I'm like, I'm not baloney. If they're getting paid, I'm getting paid from now on.
Conferences like to do that, right? They have these featured speakers who are like tweetable types of people where like you see they're trying to get registrants by showcasing these faces who may or may not be the best presenters in the space. But they've built a name for themselves for whatever that's worth, mostly through social, I would say. But I also know a lot of people who leave sessions like that wildly underwhelmed. They expected more from someone who's listed as a featured speaker, who, like you said, got a paycheck to be there. Meanwhile, other people are paying hundreds of dollars to sit, and you expect more from that person, you know? Same with keynotes of a huge conference. I don't know that everyone always realizes the amount of money that a keynote gets paid at a huge conference, but they'd probably, you know, their eyes would jump out of their faces.
Yes, I mean, some people getting on the low end, you know, 10, 12,000 and 30,000 on the high end.
Yeah, right. Yep. So it's interesting, right?
It is. And you know, people, I'm not knocking anybody hustle. I'm
No,
not
I'm not.
jealous.
I'm not saying,
Oh,
no.
yeah, no, I'm just saying, you know, when people watch this or listen to this, I want them to understand I'm not knocking anybody's hustle. I'm not jealous of anyone. In fact, I love it. Okay. I want every educator out there to get every dime they can. Do not leave money on the table, people. Do not leave money on the table, because for some reason, as a profession, we think it's noble to be a teacher. And I'm not saying that it's not, but you can do good and get paid at the same time. There's nothing wrong with that. And I need people, and this is going to go into our next question, I need people to own their brand. Like, there's so many educators who say, I'm not a brand. I'm just a teacher. You are a brand. Every individual is a brand, has a brand. And every educator should be on social, regardless if you are a business or not. So I guess my question to you is, in saying that, because you made the transition, when is it time? When will someone know, okay, it's time for me to be that edupreneur? And how do they then utilize the power of social to build their brand?
So I'll go back to everyone is a brand, which I disagree with. I do and I don't. I don't love the word branding as it's applied to a teacher or an administrator who are on social just for the connections and the resources. They're not trying to market themselves as anything above and beyond someone who's passionate about kids and learning, and that's why they're there. I don't think that they need to say to myself, I'm a fifth grade teacher and this is my brand, whereas they are more so, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I am here for, and maybe brand is just such a marketing word that's why I don't like that. However, when you are making that shift, like we're talking about, if you are looking to get into spaces where you're affording opportunities for other people, I think that next step in what we would call branding is somebody really showcasing their school. For example, if you're an administrator and you want to tell the story of your school via social, maybe you have a really awesome website with pictures of kids learning and Instagram feed and a Twitter hashtag for your district. I always think of Joe Sanfilippo and his Go Crickets hashtag. That is his brand. That is their school's brand. That if you see it, you recognize it. It is part of their culture. And he's done really good work with that. Just getting, if I would be moving in that direction into that geographic region, I'd want my kids to go to his school because I just feel good when I hear about the work of his school. And that comes through a certain level of branding. The way I approach this question is interesting because I've been in social spaces now for almost a decade. And things were different on the Twitter back in 2008, 2009 when we first got started. There were far fewer educators there. There were not a lot of us in the circuit, let's say, unless we were employed by a consulting company or a publishing company. But because we were able to find each other, that's when these ideas started bouncing off of one another, and groups like Connected Principles was formed back in the day. And those types of things emerged into, now we're going to go speak at conferences and we're going to get our names out there. We're going to get our work, our vision and our missions and our accomplishments out there to try to help others. And now that we have a company, I only recently just put a Facebook page up for our company because I just didn't even think about it before then. We've always had a website. So I have a Google site and it's just bit.ly/Hilt Consultants. And it just lists our services and how to contact us and some testimonials from people that we worked with. And it's becoming more apparent to me as I work with the Modern Learners team, the importance of marketing yourself and how to reach your intended audiences in a really impactful way without being spammy, which is really hard to do because in our Twitter, I think our Twitter circles are probably pretty similar. There is a time when you start to see people who have either written a book or develop themselves as a speaker when that's all you're seeing in their feed. And that to me is irritating. And I didn't want to be that. And so I very rarely plug Hilt consultants through my Twitter account, Lyn Hilt, because Lyn Hilt is more of like the space where I see an article that means something to me, so I share that out, or I comment on somebody's post that they've done, or I just have silliness with my Twitter friend, so I didn't want to be that person who was tweeting over and over again, I have a business now and hire me and this and that. I will share, earlier this week we did a huge workshop for modern learners. It was all about personalized learning. We got a great response from it. We had a really good discussion there. And I plugged that several times because I really wanted to get people excited about it. And I wanted people to be there. It's that balance between promoting your work and not being annoying. And because I see that in Facebook too. I don't want to see your marketing stuff over and over in your Facebook feed, which is why I kind of transitioned to adding a page for my company versus using my personal profile for that, if that makes sense. So the power of social, even something like Instagram stories, which you don't initially think about using, but it takes time to build up your followership. And thankfully for me, since I've been doing this for so long, I have a pretty good following on Twitter. Now, how many of those are real people versus companies? I don't know. But that too, and Google Plus is another place that people are like, Google Plus is dead. Well, for my work in instructional tech, sometimes in 2012, I started a community in Google Plus, and it was for instructional tech coaches. And we started out slowly, and that group is still going. And I just am so proud of what it's become with very little on my part. It's the people who are there. They ask questions and they get answers every single day. It doesn't matter, what area of the world they're coming from or what their focus is. If you can find communities of people who are willing to contribute, you're going to really be able to craft a really cool space in social. So yeah, as you're thinking about that and you're deciding when do I start to kind of promote, I would say do it carefully and do it thoughtfully. Don't spam and blast people with marketing stuff versus the other stuff that you're going to share about the work that you do. That would be my advice.
I mean, I do both. Now I do have a Twitter handle for just the business, but now my podcast is separate from my business, and I'm working on a way to sort of merge the two. Mm-hmm. But I do tweet out the stuff that I'm writing for Schoology, or if I'm going to be presenting for a conference. So I'm getting ready to present at this conference, and I'm going to put that out there. And of course, my podcast is tweeted out on a regular basis, but I also tweet out a lot of different stuff mm-hmm. that are not my stuff, and I retweet other people's as well. I think the reason I think every educator is a brand is because your brand to me signifies who you are, and what you have to offer. So if you are a librarian, for example, and you specialize in diverse books or whatever, if the content that you write about on your blog and the content that you tweet out on Twitter is that, you become that go-to person. Whether you are an individual who is speaking for money or not, when people say, man, I'm trying to build my library and I need some diverse authors, who do I go to? You are going to be that librarian people go to, because that's the story you are telling of your work.
Yes.
And so that's, for me, when I say brand, I think of that more so of a manufactured, package, right? So people have to sort of be their, genuine selves, just like Eric is very intense, whether he's in a suit or in shorts, right? Like I mean, just say, like, his brand is his brand, like, so I've seen the dude, we've hung out and he's in shorts and he is still as fiery as he is when the suit is on. Mm-hmm. So I think, that brand is just a genuine reflection sort of who you are.
Yeah, I like that you called it your story, which I think if we're going to move people, not just these small moments of success, but really make movements happen on this learning spectrum, we have to start telling more stories and living them and, connecting with people that way. So I like that. Yeah.
All right. So before we go, and this has been an interesting conversation, what are your thoughts, I guess, on the rise of the edupreneur?
So my first thought is that it's a shame that we even have a thing called an edupreneur, because teachers and educators really aren't valued to the fullest that they should be. My second thought is that I do, again, want people to share their expertise, like you were saying, if I'm a librarian and I have it together and I know book lists and I know authors and I know themes that I can provide to you, then I want you to be able to share that with others in the most streamlined way possible for you. I hate to think of, for me, every time I decide to do something like this or sit down and craft a blog post or work in my modern learners community, it's time taken from something else. And it's from my family for the most part, or from prepping for another project. So don't jump into this entrepreneurial space at the sacrifice of something else that's really important in your life, is what I'll say, because there are people where that happens, whether you jump into a really popular circuit of speakers where you're out of your house or out of the state or whatever, things get left to the side. So it's a matter of prioritizing, how is this going to serve me as an educator? How is it going to respect the other things I have going in my life at the moment? But once you've established that and you say, yeah, you know what, I do have this time to commit to growing in this area, then put yourself out there. And as you were saying, if it's whether you establish a brand or whether you tell your story in a certain way, make your ideas accessible enough so that people can contact you and say, hey, I really want to learn more about this. I think about Pernille, for example. She writes from her heart about the things that she's passionate about. And if I want to learn more about that, well, then I'm going to purchase her book. If I want to learn how to create a community of passionate readers, she gives us enough to know what she is all about. And she essentially markets herself without marketing herself, if that makes sense. And she's wildly accessible. She tweets. She will respond to people's tweets. She puts things out there about herself that she herself is struggling with as a learner and as a parent. And she's somebody that I have invested in her work from a paying perspective because I believe in what she's sharing. And I will buy people's books, even my friends, that I know would send me one for free. Somebody like Josh Sumpenhorst, who wrote a book about the new teacher revolution a couple of years back. I bought his book at ISTE. I didn't have to buy his book. He would have sent it to me. But when you find someone who has a story that is going to help your practice and your learning, and you give enough of yourself in the social spaces or in whatever space you decide, people are they're gonna buy what you're selling. And sometimes you're not even selling anything, but they're gonna follow you and they're gonna be interested in what you're learning about. So in terms of a call to action, yeah, I think the more we tell our stories, the more we share what our expertise is, what we're learning, what we're passionate about, we can kind of bring people along on this movement to innovate learning in our schools. Was that specific enough?
No, that's fantastic. Yeah. And to quote Nikki Woods, who has been on this podcast, when you bring the impact, you get the income.
Yeah.
And so awesome. Thank you, Lyn, for being a guest on the show. I thank you for taking time away from your family and your work to be on the Dr. Will Show.
Oh, well, it was my pleasure. This is time well spent.
Thank you. I appreciate this. So people, you know how I do this. The video cast is going up on YouTube. I need you to subscribe and leave comments. Audio version is going on iTunes and SoundCloud. I need you, people. Come on now. I need you to subscribe. I need you to leave comments because your boy is trying to get Oprah on the show. All right. So as always, people, I would like to thank Lyn Hilt for being a guest on the show. So invest in you, EDU. Peace.